Hey guys, Aaron here back in the garage, and today we're going to do a little brake upgrade on my 2006 Cayman S. I'm going with the Pagid yellow pads and essentially just OEM rotors from Sebra, however you pronounce them. Cross-drilled, beautiful, nice, new, shiny stuff. I'll put a link to all the parts I'm using in the description of this video, but I am told that this is the best brake setup for this car. Recently upgraded my tires to the Hankook RS4s. I've heard these are great for the track, so these will be my street tires when I am just driving this on the street, and they'll be my rain tires at the track. So here are our rotors. I can feel some warpiness in them in a big lip. That's going to be replaced. We're keeping the stock calipers, and I don't even know what pads are on here. The previous owner tracked the car, so I don't know what he put on there. Now, I was going to buy a Stop Tech kit, but I was talked out of it because I heard that the Stop Techs on the 987.1s kind of overload the computer sensors and they don't really know what to do. So I was told by a guy who tracks these cars to go with this setup. So the first thing we're gonna do is, of course, remove the wheels. All right, wheels off. First thing for my car, I have wheel spacers, so I'm gonna pull those off, set them aside. And so, like I said, we're gonna replace the pads and the rotors in this video. So once these pads come off and I don't have any more brakes, this rotor is gonna spin freely. And these are the rear brakes, so I can put the emergency brake on right now and lock this from spinning. So before I remove this, since I'm gonna change my rotor, what I'm gonna do is hit these two Phillips head screws here with some PB Blaster and let that sit for a minute, because these are the two screws that are holding the rotor on to the hub. So like I said, my very first step when replacing rotors is to go ahead and get these loose, and then I'm going to put the largest Phillips screwdriver that I have in here. I'm going to hit it with a hammer to knock any corrosion loose, and I'm going to loosen these two screws so that I can still apply the brake if I need to, so this won't spin. All right, just got this new fancy can of PB Blaster. I'm just going to give this a quick little shot. All right, gotta figure out how to use this can. I guess it's got a lock on it. So quick little shot here, quick little shot up here, and let that sit. All right, big tipped Phillips and just a hammer here to give it a couple firm taps. These are not something you want to strip out and have to drill out later. So it's giving a lot of forward force, to break these things loose without stripping them. All right, they do not want to come loose. All right, I got the biggest headed screwdriver I could find that fits in there a little bit better. All right, there we go. Got it to crack loose. It's the little guy we're getting out. I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on there when I put them back in so they don't get seized up like that. I actually don't need to remove them all the way. I'm just going to leave them in here loosely, because even though the rotor is probably not going to fall off because it's probably on there tight like these were, I'll just leave them on while I'm taking the brake pads and stuff out. All right, now we are looking behind your caliper, and we're gonna go ahead and start removing and disconnecting some stuff here. So first you'll see this wire coming in is your pad wear sensor. It's just clipped into a little recess on your caliper here. And then there's one sensor inside this pad, and then the wire continues through this clip to the other sensor on this side. So usually you can take a small screwdriver and gently coerce this sensor out of there. I try not to pull on the wires themselves directly because I don't want to snap them. And a lot of times when you're doing this, you are replacing the sensor anyway, but I think I'm gonna try to reuse mine since it never went off. Looks like the sensor part itself broke. So again, this is my first time working on the brakes on this car. All right, well, let me remove this side over here, and I have enough slack to get that out. Yeah, and this one over here is pretty done too. So you can just see it's a wire that goes over to right here, and once that wears through, it breaks the connection of the wiring, and then it has your sensor come off. And yeah, that one we'll get out in a minute, but we have enough slack now. We just need to remove this pin. So I can just pry this pin out. There's a little cotter pin that goes in a hole in this bar, and then this bar we're just gonna knock out. And I just use a punch and go right here with a hammer and strike it. Just tap it out gently. And my punch only goes so far, so at that point I go ahead and I use another tool. I just have an Allen key that is longer that can reach through there further, and I just tap on it to get this removed. Just be careful not to hit your caliper. And the spring is under a little bit of pressure. So once this pin comes out, this spring will release. The pin was applying the pressure to the spring, and this spring just pushes on the back of your pads to keep them seated. So a lot of times your pads will come with a new spring that you can replace. And this pin, before I reinstall it, I will use some sandpaper and smooth it out so it slides back in nicely. So as I showed you, my rotors have some grooves in them, and these pads are currently pressed all the way up against the rotor, so that groove is gonna stop them from being able to just be pulled straight out. So what I'm gonna have to do is push the pads in this way, which will compress that piston some and give the pad enough room to slide out. So what I like to do is I just take a cloth to protect it and just a pair of pliers, and I'm gonna squeeze against the outside of the caliper and the inside of the brake pad and just squeeze them together. And then of course the cloth goes over to protect it so that I don't scratch up the caliper. So just put it here and give it a little squeeze, and you can feel it squeezing in and pressing the brake fluid back in through the piston a little bit. Now, super easy to just slide right out. Now, some brake pads, as you can see here, have some parts that go inside of those pistons. I'll be able to show you that later once I have the calipers off, and we'll be able to see all the way inside to where the pistons are. And sometimes that is glued to the brake pad, so you have to pull it out and then up. But in my case, either these brake pads don't have them, or they already came detached and they're sitting in the pistons themselves. So we will see later on. And now I got to do the same thing. Squeeze this one and pull it out. Take these, feel it compress, and we can pull that pad out. And these pads are done. There's hardly anything left on them. Now, let me see if I can get this sensor out of this pad. See, it's kind of just snapped right here. But you can kind of see how they work. If this pad would have kept wearing down, it would have eventually ground through this sensor that was right here, disconnected the circuit, and the dummy light would have gone off. So yeah, this sensor needs to be replaced. All right, so if you were just doing brake pads only, just stick your new ones in, wire your sensors back up, hook all that stuff back up, and you're good to go. But we want to change the rotors as well, so we're gonna go ahead and have to remove these two large bolts right here that are holding this onto our hub. All right, these things are a T55 Torx bit. Probably gonna want one with a 1/2-inch drive so that you can extend something out to get a lot of leverage on them because they are gonna be very tight. All right, big long bolt, and Porsche does recommend that you replace these every time you remove one. All right, in order to remove this caliper from the hub, what we're gonna have to do is remove this 10mm bolt here that holds this bracket on, because this hard line comes up to here. The hard line is attached to the caliper there for our brake fluid, and that will give us enough clearance to move this all the way out of the way and off of our rotor. So let me just go ahead and get this guy off. All right, just a bolt and little washer right here. And this line is clipped into that bracket, and we can just go ahead and pop that off by sliding it to the left. All right, just slide that off of there to give it enough slack. All right, now we can remove the bolts here. That's it. Once that bolt is off, this is nice and loose, and we can rotate it. All right, so that is one of the pieces that I mentioned that came out of the piston. So this thing was attached to the back of the brake pad, and you can see all the other pistons have one of these things in them. We can just pull them out. So I guess what I'm gonna do with my new brake pads is just leave these in the pistons and put the new brake pads on, because if you do have these attached to your brake pads, it is a huge pain in the butt to change your brake pads without pulling your entire rotor off, and I do not want to do that. I could just leave these off altogether, I suppose, which actually, that's probably what I'll do. I'm just gonna take these things out and just leave the pistons here to press against the new pads by themselves. And you do want to check around here to make sure the boots aren't leaking or cracked or anything, because they are just rubber boots. Mine look like they're in pretty good shape. So this particular guy does not have a ton of flexibility or space to move. I usually just strap this to one of the suspension arms or part of our suspension itself. I think I can lift it up here, and for this one, I think I'm just gonna go through here and use our bracket we disconnected as the hanging point, and go up through our spring. All right, I'll just zip tie it there to keep the pressure off of the lines. That's enough out of the way. Now I'm just gonna go back down here and remove the rest of the screws. All right, now normally I would hit this with a dead blow hammer to loosen it up enough to get the corrosion off to be able to pull this straight off. But since I'm throwing this one away when I'm done, I don't have a problem just using a regular hammer on it. Gonna bang it a few times. Now be careful, I have wheel studs, so once this comes loose, it's gonna be resting on my wheel studs. If you don't have these, once it comes loose, it will just fall off. So prepare yourself to hold on to it. All right, it is loose now. I guess I've never removed one of these with wheel studs on it, now that I'm thinking about it, so they seem to be interfering a lot more than I thought they would be. All right, well, I guess I'm going to remove a couple of the wheel studs. All All right, very important first step for the rears is make sure your parking brake is not engaged so that you can get your rotor off. All right, I just like to use like a little wire brush and brush around this middle hub just to make sure that it's nice and clean, to make good contact with our new rotor. All right, just push the new rotor back on. Go ahead and put these screws back in. Little anti-seize on them if you prefer. Oh, that looks so much prettier. All right, so it turns out that my parking brake was not completely released. That's why I was having problems getting my rotor off. So if you start having any problems, make sure you check that, and then you will not have to remove your wheel studs. Now I will have to replace my parking brake to get these torqued back correctly. All right, guys, I got distracted for a few days, mostly because I did not have my rear brake pads. I only had the fronts from Pagid. So these are the Pagid yellows that we are going to be using for the rears. And I just wanted to continue now with this. I do have this spreader here, and I use this on the caliper. So what we're going to do is the pistons are mostly opened right now, but they need to be all the way opened so that when you have a new thick pad, they will fit over your rotor. So what you do is you just stick this in and you crank it like a caulk gun, and it spreads those pistons for you. And also, while I was waiting, I went ahead and got these parts. They are the little set screws for here, since some of mine were starting to strip a little bit because it was so tough to get them out. I'm just going to go ahead and replace the ones that are stripping. I really wish they would make these things with a hex head or Torx or something instead of Phillips, but all right, that one's now repaired. That's good. Got them all the way open. After talking to the guy that recommended these pads, he said he just uses these things anyway. He said it just helps with heat dissipation a little bit, he thinks. So I'm just going to go ahead and press these back in. I'm not going to attach them to the pad. Now you'll notice there's a smaller one that goes on the top and a bigger one that goes on the bottom. And you can put anti-squeal grease or whatever on these, on the points that make contact. But I'm just throwing mine in here. All right, so this is really gonna make me want to paint my calipers yellow to match the rest of my car. All right, next step, I also bought replacement bolts like you're supposed to reattach my caliper. So I'm just gonna go ahead and snip my zip tie that's holding this up. So I can drop this back down into place. Take one of my new bolts, my other new bolt, and so I don't forget, I'm going to take my 10mm, put it back on the bracket, and reattach the cable up here. All right, now I can snug that back down. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and tighten the bolts down. Again, they're one-time use bolts, so you should replace them each time, and they need to be torqued to 63 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to use my regular long ratchet here to get them started. All right, switching over to the torque wrench, which is 63 foot-pounds, or let's see, it's also 85.4 Newton meters if you're a Newton meter kind of guy. All right, just put a little sandpaper and sand this thing down. Look at all that nastiness to make sure this slides back in easily. Gonna reinsert it from the back, making sure the hole for the little pin is kind of facing up so we'll be able to see it again. All right, here's our spring that goes on to hold these down. So I'm just gonna compress it with my finger while I slide this pin back in. It's gonna go over that, through the other one. Give it a little spin, and if all goes well, you'll be able to see it come back through here. All right, that's back in. I just got to put the little clip back here. All right, if you need to adjust where that pin is, I just have this pick that I have in the hole, and I can use the pick to rotate it to line up here nicely. All right, clip back in. Now you can see the old brake pads had this groove in here that you could put the wear sensor into so that it would grind when it got low, and you can see that the new pads do not have that. They have the little clip for the wire, but there's nothing in the pads to put the sensor in. And since I'm gonna be checking this all the time anyway and don't need the dummy sensor, I am just going to zip tie it up here out of the way somewhere. All right guys, now I'm gonna do the front pads and rotors. This is the front driver's side that we got right here. And you can see that, whew, that pad is worn down. Did a good job on the last track day. And this rotor is pretty shot too. So these are gonna be a lot like the rears that we just did. So we're gonna start by removing this little pin, pulling it out, taking something to knock this pin out, remove our spring, squeeze our pads in here so that we can get them separated and pull the pads out. All right, so you can see these stock pads have these little weight kind of things on the ends of them. I'm gonna remove the T55s holding the caliper in place. And again, these are one-time use bolts, so we're gonna replace them. All right, and right back here, we have a 10 millimeter holding this bracket on, so got to remove that. So this one did have a washer with it. Now I'm gonna make sure I have my zip tie ready and take off the final bolt up here. And then I'm going to use my zip ties this time, and I'm gonna attach it to the spring up here. That's the easiest place I found to attach it, but just get it up out of the way somewhere. This one can be a little bit more of a pain to get up here. All right, we got that one up here. Now you may have seen this plate fall out while I was doing that. Let's see, this plate actually has one of these in it still. And yep, the top one is snapped off inside the piston. For my bottom one here, it feels like part of it is still in there in the piston, and the top one is completely missing. So whoever changed them last just left this crap in here, but I'm gonna get rid of this. It's gonna go straight to my piston spreaders. Make sure they are all nice and open. All right, now I'll come back to that after replacing my rotor here. All right, screws on the rotor, same as before. PB blaster the other day, a couple of whacks with a hammer on the screwdriver, and I already have this one loose. So this is coming out. And again, I bought new ones of these, so I will replace them each time. They're really cheap. And if you don't have wheel studs, be careful. Taps with the hammer, get it loose. Off. Wire brush to clean up the hub. All right, the rear rotors are interchangeable. The front ones are marked left and right. You have to buy them separately, so be careful. I'll put a link in the description for all of this stuff again, but the left one is going on the left. Let me line up my little holes. Again, wheel studs come in super handy. Put our new screw in. Make sure it's nice and seated. Put the other screw in, and we're good to put our brake pads in. All right, these are our beautiful and pricey Pagid yellow pads. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop these guys in. Just gonna snip my wire up here and see if you pressed your caliper pistons in far enough, if it will slide on. Get one of my new bolts. All right, got number 2 started. And then while there's still a little wiggle room, I like to try to get my 10mm back in. Again, I'm gonna sand this pin so it slides in a lot easier. All right, good enough for government work. All right, we'll put our little spring clip thingy back in here to hold our pads down. Insert this back here from the rear. And it should snap right in. Put this little pin back in here so our bolt stays. When the caliper's off, it's a great time to clean it. It can be beautiful, but mine's a track car. There, pristine. All right, let's torque the big boys back down. It is the same as the rears. It is 63 foot-pounds. And again, there's no place for these on here, so I'm just going to zip tie them up out of the way. Typically, I'll just zip tie them right here to the stainless steel brake line. And there we go. All right, Porsche is none the wiser, but look how beautiful this is. And I cannot wait for the first track day using these pads and rotors, because it is going to be so much better than stock. These aren't even bedded in, and they are legit, I don't know, 7 times better. Holy crap, I can't believe it. Oh my God. All right, just got back from a fun little run. Oh yeah, I can feel the heat just coming off of these things. Oh man, very nice. All right, guys, that's it. See, it wasn't bad at all. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please subscribe, tell all your friends, subscribe to the channel, do all of those great things, and check out the products in the description below. If you guys do decide to purchase things from my links, I typically make a few bucks on it, so it does help the channel. So thank you for your support, and I will see you guys on the next video.